while you are planning to be gone on this trip, they're planning to come up to your bake shop, take all this stuff, and remove you from the company. Hello, new mic on, so we are testing, and do I look different at all to you? Anything at all? If you didn't notice, I'm 1 year older. My birthday was yesterday, and it was an amazing birthday. I had so many friends come out. We went out dancing after. LA life is still exceeding even my greatest dreams. If you are watching this and you're not subscribed to me, my greatest birthday wish would be that you hit that subscribe button, please. So today we are going over Tate's Bake Shop and Kathleen King, the founder. We are going to go over the story that Kathleen King told on how I built this. And we all know Tate's. Those delicious cookies, they're so good. Kathleen King inspires me so much. Just wait till you hear this story. The adversity she went through. She built a company for 20 years and then it failed, and then she decided to start again. You'll hear the details of that failure, but essentially it was a bad choice of partnership, some bad legal decisions she made. There are so many good learnings to take out of it, but even more than that, it's just an entertaining story. It's so thrilling, start to finish. Let's get into it. Kathleen King grew up on a farm in the Hamptons. We all know Hamptons is like the bougie vacation spot. She actually came from quite a poor family. They owned a farm and her mom was a nurse. They made just enough money to get by. All of the kids helped out on the farm. Kathleen's older sister had to bake a lot of goods for their farm stall that they would sell produce and other items out of. When she turns 14, doesn't really want to work for her parents anymore. She decides to go get a job in town. This job gets passed down to Kathleen, and she just takes the recipe from the Nestle bag of chocolate chips. We've all seen it and used it. The way that it would go is that her dad would buy the ingredients and she would make all of the cookies and she would keep all of the profits. That was kind of her spending money. She's continuously baking these cookies and over time tweaking the recipe here and there, figuring out how exactly she wants it. So they were chewy but like crispy on the edges. They just kept growing and growing in popularity, and they were doing so well sales-wise that her dad was like, okay, you have to start buying the ingredients now because you are making a decent amount of money. She would have the summer off during high school and she would bake these cookies. She would probably spend 10 hours a day baking, 7 days a week. Like, this was all she was doing in the summer, and she was making $5,000 per summer, which to a teenager, to make $5,000 in 3 months, that's like life-changing kind of money. That's insane. It's good to mention that when you're making cookies, the cogs are very good. And if you don't know what cogs are, I have a video right here where you can learn all about it, but it's basically the cost of the good. So all the costs that go into making the product. But again, if you want a more fleshed out version of that explanation, watch that before you continue on with this story. This is the 70s, by the way. She is doing this every summer during high school. She ends up going to college every summer, comes back to the farm, is doing the same cookie making. And again, they're in the Hamptons. So there's so many people coming to vacation in the Hamptons during the summer from New York City. It doesn't even matter that much that she's not doing it any time besides the summer, because that's when they get the whole volume of customers coming down. In 1979, she graduates from college and comes back to her parents' farm to do the cookie making that summer again. Her mom and her are talking about her future and what she wants to do, and she's not super sure, but she ends up finding out that there's a bake shop in town that's currently for sale. The previous 2 bakeries that were there went bust pretty quickly, and it was open now for whoever wanted to buy it. She goes and she checks it out and she's like, yeah, this is gonna be my post-college plan. It's also key to note that she went to college for 2 years. So she's only 21 when she decides to open this bake shop. She has $5,000 of saving, then needs a little bit more and borrows some money from her brother. Mind you, none of them have that much money. So it's a big deal for her to be starting this and putting all of her money down on this one building. And this is 1980 when it opened. Most of her marketing is just word of mouth. People knew her from the farm. They know that she's opened a bakery in town. She said that she also ran a few print ads. But again, there's a lot of people passing by, vacationing in the Hamptons. One day, Florence Fabricant walks in. Kathleen has no idea who she is. And if you don't know who she is, she's one of the biggest New York Times food reviewers. If you get a positive article written from her on your product, I mean, that says a lot, and that will bring you in so many sales. Kathleen serves her like any other customer. A week or 2 later, an article comes out in the New York Times by Florence Fabricant raving about these cookies. Kathleen's Bake Shop is very popular during the summer, getting even more popular, especially after that article, but traction is just building and building, and money is so good. But during the off season, now she's not going back to school. Like, she's still running this business during the fall and the winter and the spring when no one's really coming to the Hamptons. She has to figure out a way to make up for that lost revenue. She decides to start trying to sell it in grocery stores as like a packaged food item. She just comes up with the idea to put samples in bags, slap a label on it that she would hand write. She would just deliver to grocery stores in Manhattan. She would drive up and be like, "Hi, I'd love to sell these with you." And it is not like that anymore, let me tell you. It is so hard to get on shelf these days as a new product in a New York grocery, in any grocery store actually. These days have sales teams and you've got to deal with brokers and you have to pay all these crazy fees. But again, we're talking about the 80s. The people who liked her cookies would be like, yeah, give me a case, we'll try and put them on the shelf and see if they sell. She also said that it was kind of a novelty to have homemade cookies on grocery store shelves. Some people knew her from the Hamptons as well. She was just doing quite well, selling all around New York, some Long Island locations, some places in Texas and some places in California. By no means a big national brand, but they were doing well. As the retail business started growing, she had hired some delivery drivers and that was taken care of. But at the actual bake shop, she really didn't have a life. She was going in at 2 a.m., leaving at 8 p.m. And she was going in that early because she had to make all of the products and make sure that they were amazing and then open up early in the morning. She was just there all day, balancing between actually like physically working the shop and doing all of the back end managerial stuff. 18-hour days, 6 days a week, giving herself 1 day off. It was just so much craziness, but also, they're doing very well. She needs to eventually purchase another building nearby so that they have more space for baking and creating products. She's got to put down a $50K down payment for this new building. She has $40,000 saved up, so she needs that other 10. Goes to her family and they're like, "I'm sorry, we don't have 10K for you. We wish we could help." And then, right at that same time, a neighbor ends up passing away and leaves her family $10,000 exactly, which is wild. Her family decides to loan her the money and she now has $50K to buy this new building, and it allows them, again, to keep growing. This goes on for 20 years that she's running Kathleen's Bake Shop. Over time, more staff are hired. She's able to take full weekends, but she's still extremely involved in the business. And after 20 years, that burns you out quite significantly. So by the time she's in her early 40s, Kathleen decides to take on the idea of possibly selling the company and transitioning out. She finds this one guy who she feels like will be a good partner. They're speaking and he was like, "Okay, I also really want to bring my brother in on this deal because I really love what you're doing." She was like, "Amazing, yes, let's do that." And the way that it works out through all of their discussions, they're gonna pay her $900,000, but not up front because they don't have the money up front. They're basically going to pay her in installments. She's gonna be, transitioning out during this whole time, but until they pay her this full $900,000, she's also taking profits from the business. So this is the agreement they come up with. But they also are negotiating ownership, and she has built this company instinctually and over time with slow growth, but she doesn't have a business background. So because there's 3 of them, they decide to break it up into thirds. So these 3 people each own a third of the business, which she thought, why would they not all get an even share if they're going to be taking over the business eventually and taking it off of her hands? But once she only has 30%, mind you, those 2 brothers own 60% of the company. Many founders don't want to give away more than half of their equity because once you do that, you can't make all of the decisions. Other people can actually outvote you because you don't own the company predominantly anymore. This is where things start to go awry. The idea that these brothers have over the next few years is to build up the packaged food side of the business even more, which makes sense, right? They decide to move production to Virginia because it's cheaper, and I think they just found a good facility for it. The agreement for the time being is that Kathleen is going to run the bake shop and they're going to be in Virginia getting production ramped up. But things very quickly start going wrong. They're sending her samples from the facility and she hates all of them. She sent them down with her recipes, but the thing is, even if you have the recipes, if you don't train the people at the factory to do it properly and exactly how you need it done, things go wrong all the time in like assembly lines or in the mixing process. It's quite a busy environment, and so you need someone doing quality assurance and making sure what's made in this kitchen at Kathleen's bake shop is the same thing being made in this facility in Virginia. But every sample she's getting tastes horrible. Also during this time, she starts getting notifications from different vendors that they're buying ingredients from. They're saying, hey, I'm not being paid for what I'm selling you. Because remember, when you buy products, usually if a food company buys ingredients, they have 30 or 60 or 90 days to pay that amount to the vendor. All of those amounts for all the different vendors, they're not getting paid. Kathleen is like freaking out. She starts using money from the bake shop that she's running to pay them. Relations are just getting really, really tense between her and these brothers. They're just proving to be super incompetent, but they also like just don't want to listen to Kathleen. In January of 2000, she has this bike trip planned and she will be out of town. She gets a call from an employee who was brought down to Virginia to help them ramp up production down there. He's very loyal to Kathleen and he calls her and he says, while you are planning to be gone on this trip, they're planning to come up to your bake shop, take all this stuff, and essentially remove you from the company. So obviously she decides not to go on this bike trip, and one day they come in, they hand her legal papers while she's there, and they fire her from the company. And they are well within their rights to do so because they own collectively more of the company than she does. Not only is she getting fired, she finds out that they are $600,000 in debt. Even though she's being fired, she still has that stake. I mean, they can't take her stake away from her, but they can tell her that she has to be removed from the business because she's a 1/3 owner. A third of that $600,000 is her responsibility to pay off. All of this is just so overwhelming. They start getting in a legal battle. It gets just extremely messy. After a long, drawn out battle, they end up settling. I mean, Kathleen gets kind of screwed. Like the same stuff pretty much ends up happening. She's removed from the company. She actually is able to get rid of her 1/3 of the company, but she has to pay off that $200,000 that she owes for the debt. They get to take her name. They get to take Kathleen's Bake Shop, and that is their brand to do whatever they want with. So putting your name on a brand can be tricky at times. She's 42. Building this company has been the only thing that she's ever known. She ends up getting the bake shop. They're more interested in the packaged food side of the company. She decides at 42 to do it all over again. She's gonna start from scratch and she is gonna build a better cookie company. And she is going to compete with her old best recipe and company to do so. Obviously it needs a new name because she can't use her own name or that brand. And she decides to come up with Tate, named after her dad. This is where the story might get a little bit faster in pace because she does create an entire new brand. She, tweaks the recipe. She makes a different cookie that's even better. Her legal story was quite public. When she was going into these retail stores to then ask them to take on Tate, a lot of them just took her on because she had already built up a rapport with these people. It's not like they had to go through a long process of accepting her into the store. They knew her already because she was with Kathleen. Some of the stores even took Kathleen's Bake Shop products off of their shelves in solidarity. Tate's started popping up all over the New York area. Her goal was to retire by 55 and have an exit strategy from the company. That was her committing 13 years to building this company once again. Within the first few years, they've got about 40 employees. They've got a couple $1 million of revenue that they're doing annually. They're growing and growing and growing. They're nationwide at this point. And they're bringing on legit sales teams and brokers, like I mentioned. It's not the 80s anymore. We're in the early 2000s now. So things are a little bit more structured, and she is just spreading all over the United States. She's got this vigor behind her. She said that she never held a grudge. She was determined to make this a bigger thing than she even originally conceptualized Kathleen's Bake Shop to be, because she wanted to win and she wanted to be the best. And the funny thing is, a few years into building Tate's, she hears that Kathleen's Bake Shop goes under. They go out of business. Why? Because Kathleen was the mastermind behind all of it. And those guys never really knew what they were doing. Rachel Ray calls Tate's the best cookies in America. Gwyneth Paltrow is raving about them. The business just snowballs. Again, you might think that I'm going very quickly over this part of the journey, but once you start your first company, all of the other companies that you create, if you choose to do so, become easier and easier and easier, because no matter what you're selling, a lot of the practices are the same. You get better at kind of figuring out risk versus reward. You make smarter business decisions quicker. Let's get more to the 2010s. She starts looking for an exit. It's, like I said, has taken over the country. They are doing amazingly. She ends up selling an 80% stake of the company in 2014 for $100 million. What? She grew up on a farm. 12 years prior, she was out of money after building a business for 20 years. And now she's just made $100 million. And the crazy part is, actually, the private equity firm that buys Tate's from her, they actually sell it 4 years later for $500 million. So in 4 years, they made like $400 million, which is wild. It shows that it just continued to grow past her selling the company. It gives me goosebumps. It's just, oh. Kathleen King, you are a badass and you are so amazing. Why did Tate's succeed? Obviously, the good recipe. You need a really amazing product to keep having people come back and want it, and more and more and more. But it was also Kathleen needing to find a solution for not having business during 8 months of the year and deciding to drive into Manhattan, pop into stores, like store after store after store. It wasn't all yeses, there were so many no's. Just deciding to figure out a new channel for bringing in money and being determined. She just had so much pride that she knew she couldn't let it not work out. When you decide that something is going to work out, and you have the good recipe and you have the tenacity, all of that goes into the foundational elements, making that decision of saying this will work out, it's kind of the same as manifesting. I know a lot of people hate that, but Kathleen is an incredible person. She is just positivity personified. That really helped as well, because think about it, even back to the farm days. She had to be selling those cookies, getting people to actually purchase them to try them before they would get hooked on them. Great recipe, tenacity, and deciding that it's going to happen, and then also great character. If a founder has good business sense and a great character, that combination is... And good business sense doesn't mean that you have to have gone to business school or know what's going on, but you pick up on it and you make the mistakes and you learn and you iterate. That was the story of Tate's Bake Shop and Kathleen King making $100 million. Thank you so much for watching another video. I love having this time with you and all gathering here to get excited about cool people doing cool things. I love you guys so much. And again, if you want to give me some birthday love, subscribe and like this video, give me a comment. I will see you in my next video. Bye guys.